I'll start here again. Okay, so thanks everyone for your patience. As you said, just trying to learn how it all works. Okay, so what we'd like to do is start with a warm-up activity. So we'd love for you, please feel free to jump in and share. Everyone is unmuted. Tell us a little bit about your name, your pronoun, your organization or school or where you are working, if you'd like, or maybe just how you're connected to the topic of this webinar. And maybe if you can share with us quickly, when you hear the words grassroots movements, what are the first couple of words that come to mind? I ask that you can maybe, everyone can mute themselves because there's going to be background noise I can already hear. But if you can then feel free to jump in and unmute yourself when you'd like to share. Just take like 1 minute just to share with us so that we know who's on this webinar. Who would like to start? Please don't be shy. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
So my name is Agne. My preferred pronoun is she. My organization, I work at an organization called Crossing Borders in Copenhagen in Denmark. And I will also be a facilitator in the next training of the Creator Grassroots. So that's my connection also to this webinar in a way. And when I hear the words grassroots movements, what comes into my mind is people's power. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. Orkan, do you think you can mute your microphone just because I can hear some background noise, if you don't mind? Please go ahead. I'd love jump in. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me correctly because there's some noise. I'm Nathan. I'm from France in the southeast. I studied a bit in the UK and now I'm in Brussels for an internship. I work mostly in France, where I'm in like a lot of different organizations. What we try to, like what I really like is trying to implement a campaign to mobilize our governments and also the head of the schools and the university to have more environmental education. And I would love to do that at the European level as well. So that's a bit me. And when I think about grassroots movements, yeah, people power, I would say need for a good organization, a good like plan for it. That's me.
Thank you very much. Who's next? Please feel free. We'd love to hear everyone's voices. Go ahead. Yeah, jump in.
Hello, my name is Tiranon. I'm also a facilitator for this prep team meeting for the seminar. And currently I'm the external relations of YE on the board as a board member, so I'll be there for the next couple of months. And currently I'm working in Peter Ferry Trust and I'm at work now, so this is my time off to talk to you, which I'm really happy about. You can go by he for me, and for me, Grassroots Movements is the foundation of an ecological or environmental movement, and it's the basis for which it stands and which it flows, and that has to be done on a consensual level. So yeah, that's me. Thank you. Look forward to the next couple of hours with you.
Great, thank you so much. Who's next? Great, Eurgain, thank you.
Hi, I'm Eurgain. My preferred word is she or her. And as Jamsa mentioned earlier, I'm currently an European Solidarity Corps volunteer with YEE. So that's why I'm involved. I'm also one of the facilitators for the next upcoming training course happening in July. And when I hear of the words grassroots movements, I think of people feeling empowered to change.
Wonderful, thank you. Keep it going, who is next? Great, please, thank you.
Hello, my name is Yetişgin. I'm from Albania. I'm volunteer at EDEN organization. EDEN is full member of YE network. I don't have a preferred pronoun. When I hear the words grassroots movements, my mind is captured from two words: skills, creativity, and peoples.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Who else is on the chat? Yes, Tasha?
Hey, I'm Tasha. My preferred pronoun would be her or she. I'm a board member of Youth and Environment Europe, and also I volunteer for Young Researchers of Serbia. First words which came to my mind when I'm thinking about grassroots movements would be collective actions, community, and people power, power to people.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. We still have a few people left.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello, I'm Nertil. I represent Milieu Contact Albania. We have an experience more than 19 years in this organization. We are working in many programs or many activities about building capacity or organizing the people, young people, also in environmental solution or issue.
Oh, I think we lost you. Hello?
Okay.
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. It's the first time for me. This experience is the first time for me that I will be there in Brno, and the first time that I'll be part of Youth Environmental Europe. So I'm glad to hear you and to know more about you, more about Youth Environmental Europe.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Okay, did we miss anyone else? Or I think we have everyone. Oh, Andreas. Uh-oh, Andreas is not sure he can get his microphone to work, so he sent us some text. So his name is Andy or Andreas, and he's been in, this is an interesting organization, FOJAKTIV. I will not even try to pronounce it, I'm sorry. He's currently studying environmental science at the University of Greifswald in Germany. He has no idea really about grassroots movements until now, but it sounds interesting, so would like to know more about it. Wonderful. Maya, please feel free. And thank you, Andreas, for sending that about us.
Hi, I am Maya from Serbia. Currently, I am at the university. I have one more exam to go. And my preferred pronoun is she. And when I think about the grassroots movements, I also don't know a lot about it, but I think it is a people who are willing to change something.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maya. Please, yes.
Hello, I am Tuğçe from Turkey. I am studying psychology currently, and I am interested in environmental psychology. And my organization is Children of Nature. I am also a volunteer at Greenpeace Mediterranean. It is my first time to hear something about grassroots movements, so I am so exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Rafaela? Rafaela, did you want to say something? No? Okay, anyone else who has not spoken, speak now or forever hold your peace. We'd love to have everyone's, but I don't know what happened to Rafaela. Okay. Oh, we cannot hear Rafaela. Yes, there's something wrong with your microphone. I'm sorry. If you would like to type something, yes, please feel free. And in the meantime, let's see, I can also share a bit about myself. My name is Romy. As I said, my preferred pronoun is she. I work as Cansu said, I worked with many different organizations, but right now I'm working mainly with Ticket to Europe in Galicia. And when I hear the words grassroots movements, what comes to mind is change, action, people's empowerment, and bottom-up approach. Rafaela, were you able to send us some information about you? Okay. Great. Rafaela is from Albania, representing Environment and Territory Management Institute. Wonderful. And when Rafaela hears the words grassroots movement, what comes to mind? Just a couple of words. Influence and good ones into the community. Okay, doing good things for the community. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you all for the warm-up activity and getting to know each other more. So really nice to hear all of your ideas about the words that come into your mind when you hear grassroots movements. We're just going to quickly review, for those of you who weren't with us, we had a seminar in Ireland, and we were able to actually really go deeply into what are grassroots movements and how do you define them. So we just wanted to give you, just for all of us to be on the same page, this was the definition that we used. Grassroots movements are about mobilizing, or a movement that mobilizes a group of people who are passionate about a cause, and it mobilizes them to take action and harness the power of their conviction from the bottom up. So taking this bottom up approach is really important, where it's from the people, not from the higher government or someone else trying to empower the people, but it's really something that starts from the bottom up. And of course, it's to push for a different outcome. So this was really the definition that we were using. 1 second, let me just see to make sure there's no background noise. Yes, okay. Okay, wonderful. So now what I'd actually like to ask you all to do is, we all have different experiences here. Some people have a lot of experience with grassroots movements. Some people have never heard this term before, and that's wonderful. We love and celebrate diversity in our own experience. Oops. So what we're going to ask you to do is actually share with us, maybe in like 1 to 2 minutes, what are some examples of environmental grassroots movements that you know of? And maybe you can share with us a bit about them and what different methods or styles of activism you've seen them use to increase their visibility and create change. What we're going to do is really encourage just free discussion. We really want to hear from you all. And again, thinking about what are examples of environmental grassroots movements you know of, and what are different methods and styles of activism. And actually, what we're going to do is, as we discuss and share, and feel free to really participate and get engaged, we're going to actually have Olalla from our wonderful graphic facilitator. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite her to share her screen. I will stop sharing my screen, and we will invite her to share her screen so she will actually graphically record what it is that we're talking about. So we also have these nice visuals going back and forth. Thank you so much, Olalla. Wow, very nice. So feel free to share with us, what are some examples that you know of? Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. This is all from your personal experience, what you've seen or what you know of environmental grassroots movements and different methods they use. Who would like to, please feel free to write in the chat. Who would like to start us off? Rafaela she can't speak, unfortunately, but she's saying campaigns, sessions, training courses. Absolutely, campaigns and session training course are different methods. Great. Gökşen, yes, please.
Climate strikes, the most recent ones.
Mm-hmm. Climate strikes, yes. Can you tell us, maybe for those who aren't familiar, just a quick summary of what that is?
Yes, sure. Last year in 2018, in August, Greta Thunberg started she was 15 at that time, 15-year-old schoolgirl. She started to strike from school by saying that actually if the planet will not be viable for her, there is no reason for her to learn more mathematics or physics or natural sciences. So she started to strike every Friday in front of the Swedish Parliament, and it inspired millions of young people across the world. And in the first climate strike that happened in March, there was more than 1.6 million students that joined the school strike for climate. And the latest one was on 24th of May, and it was during the European elections. And it was more than 1.4 million people, including the parents and students that joined the global climate strike.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Who else can share some ideas of what you've seen or heard of, or methods that you've seen used? I see a lot of familiar faces from our seminar in Ireland, so I'm sure you can share with us, for those who weren't there, some of the things we talked about as well. Tiernan, please. Thank you so much.
So just because you said Ireland, if you weren't aware at the time that a petition was made, signatures were taken, money was raised from a grassroots level, so much so that they were able to take the Irish government to the courts. So all of this was done without any funding from anyone above. It was all at a horizontal level, and they successfully managed to beat the government and got the high courts to announce last week that the government owed, for the moment, 30 million to climate change directives, and then in the future it can go to the Supreme Court, where hopefully it can go further than that, and they'll be obliged by law to then reprimand everything that they've done in the meantime.
Sorry, Tiernan, can you tell us, I think we missed it, can you tell us which movement you're talking about?
It's called Climate Case Ireland, and it was an initiative, a grassroots movement, to raise money and take it to the courts, but done from a grassroots level, that there was no direct funding from anyone above. It was all done at a community-based approach.
Ah, great. And you said that now they're really having a lot of impact in like through policy and advocacy on the government.
Well, the government announced a climate emergency like 2 weeks ago, but then this week they gave 2 licenses to China and somebody else for offshore gas exploration. So I mean, on paper, yes, we achieved a lot, but in reality, I think the suits keep on shaking hands.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a bit more about what methods they used?
Yeah, they tapped into the local communities. So these protests were happening actually around the school protests, but like you would see the majority of the people were still the same. So there was school strikes happening around Greta Thunberg's as well. So they were just putting on a lot of pressure onto the government via strikes and direct action, taking over the bridges of Dublin City.
Great, thank you so much. Rafaela also wrote here that she's been part of flash mobility, maybe flash mobs, and that's a great method as well. Yes, I've also seen different organizations using flash mobs in the center of their towns to really gain visibility. Absolutely. Who else would like to share? Oops, sorry. Bilinç, please feel free.
Hello, I will give an example from Turkey. In 2013, the general name, I will say Gezi protests, but it may not mean anything for my friends here. So it started as there was a park in the city center, and they wanted to cut the trees, and the state wanted to cut trees and make a shopping mall. So it started a few environmentalist groups to protecting the park. But then after the police violence against them, it spread to all country for 1 month, maybe more. In many cities there were protests, and the message of the groups have changed from an environmental defense to defense of lifestyle, democracy. It's never become it never gained a structure. It was always organic movement through Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media. So people were just saying, okay, tonight we are going here, we will do this, and they were just coming together. Millions of people contributed to that. That was nice days for Turkey.
Great, thank you. And feel free if you guys have any other questions about these different examples that are coming up, or these different methods that are used, feel free to ask one another. That's really nice. Natan, I see your hand raised. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me. I could speak about Extinction Rebellion. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it, but so you can maybe complete what I'm gonna say. It's a really interesting movement. It happened, I think, like a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. Tiernan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In the UK, especially. And the idea is to use civil disobedience, which is a concept that you can disobey when you have a really good reason, and if you think that it's your citizen right to do so. And for example, when I was in Edinburgh in Scotland, for example, like what kind of things they do, they stayed in the National Museum because there was the annual meeting of fuel company, because Scotland is a huge country for fuel exportation, offshore and inshore. And so they just stayed in the museum. And so the meeting. So civil disobedience, that are the main tools that the movement is using. And yeah, it's quite strong, especially in London. And I know in all Europe you have some Extinction Rebellion groups. So I think it's a great example of grassroots.
Thanks, Natan. Can you give us some examples of civil disobedience that you've seen Extinction Rebellion use?
For example, I have a friend in London. She went there 2 days, and the second day, it was her to stuck her hand on the pavement on the bridge. And so she put glue on her hand and just put her hand on the floor. And then, of course, like it was really hard to get rid of the protesters in the bridge, and they just like stopped all the circulation and the traffic for a day. So that's kind of civil disobedience.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other? I think I also saw recently on Extinction Rebellion's social media, they were posting on Instagram that they actually went into one of the largest like metro or subway stations, and they went actually like streaking, and it was written all over their bodies, Extinction Rebellion. So really, let's say, like in your face at their method to get their point across. Absolutely. Anyone else have different? Yeah, please go ahead.
I have one example from Albania. I can share now. This is a movement we had in September of 2018, also this year, during the European Mobility Week. I think that, and you know what is European Mobility Week. In this case, in Albania, we, together with other environmental NGOs, also 50 youngsters and representative of community, we went on the street with banners in our hands to ask business to free the sidewalks. So to give a direct message to the local and central government. With this action had a big impact on community, but not enough impact on government, let's say. However, it inspired a lot of youngers and gave them more confidence to fight and raise their voices. This is one of the examples on Mobility Week, on European Mobility Week. Also, we have another project which are working about air pollution. Air pollution in Albania is a major environmental issue, especially in the capital city, which is Tirana. We are involving also the high school students to give messages for air pollution, to using the bicycle and share the car. In general, that's all. Something that we went to the school and where is the problem, because we have a lot of cars that we are using and decrease of urban greenery.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And just to remember to, feel free to write your name or raise your hand if you want to speak. Ergi has been dying to speak, and I'm so sorry I have not called on you before. Please feel free. We're dying to hear from you.
In 2030, in Albania, in December, in Albania, we had biggest mobility of young people against a decision from the government that USA offered to the government of Albania to destroy the waste of chemical weapons in Albania. And young people, students, get down in the street, and they started to organize some flash mobility protests and several action until the government took the decision to not to destroy the chemical weapons in Albania.
Wow, wonderful. And can you tell us a bit more about the methods that they used to make sure there was no chemical waste?
Was not clarified for the public, but they pretended that the methods was with a high technology and was not was not with a high impact on environment.
Okay, interesting.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Any last, maybe we'll take one more if there's anyone burning, dying to share some, either a specific environmental grassroots movements you saw, or just even methods that you've seen that have been used that have been very helpful for grassroots movements. Agne, please feel free.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
My favorite movement personally is the Chipko movement. It started in India in 1970s, where women of the village were just hugging the trees in order to stop the contractors from cutting them. Yeah, and it's now seen as a eco-feminist movement because women were the ones that were affected by the deforestation the most, and it was very successful. They stopped cutting the forests. It spread all over India as well. Yeah, so that was the 1970s, and it also reminds me of the Gelände movement in Germany, where the activists, in order to stop they wanted to create a new coal plant. So activists, in order to stop that, they were living in trees or tying themselves to trees, so the contractors again could not come and cut the forest. So that's the method, basically.
Gives a new meaning to tree huggers, right?
It's actually the tree huggers also comes. It says that it comes from that movement.
Wow, wonderful. Well, thank you all, and thank you so much, Olalla, for putting all of this into this beautiful presentation. I'm going to invite Olalla to continue to keep adding, although Olalla, you can stop sharing your screen for right now. So what we are going to do actually is continue and fill in some of these blanks, well, not blanks, but some additional, let's say, methods and activities, examples of grassroots movements that have been used. So let me just, thank you all for your contributions. That was really, really wonderful, fruitful discussion. So now I'm going to invite Eurgain to share a bit more about some of the methods that we haven't talked about, or anything else that she'd like to add. Eurgain?
Yes, thanks. So thanks for all the examples. We'll just go through and discuss some things that might not be mentioned, but maybe some methods that you have already heard of. So some of the most common methods are, as some of you mentioned, social media campaigns, sending letters, sending emails, also putting up posters, and getting signatures for petitions either online or in person. Other common methods that can be used are setting up information tables. So you could go to a festival or an event, set up a table and inform people about your cause, and grab different people that might not be aware of the situation. There's also things like door-to-door canvassing, talking with people on the street, and also raising money for campaigns. Some interesting or maybe alternative methods that can be used, that can be more inclusive, or maybe for people who are a bit more introverted like myself, who maybe doesn't have the confidence to go out and do civil disobedience. There's things such as advert hacking, things such as beer labels, or creating beer mats, where you examples of going around and sticking them on beer bottles in a pub and starting, a conversation about your cause. Things such as cross-stitch banners are a very creative way of getting a message across. Also flash mobs that have been mentioned. guerrilla leafleting. So you sneak your leaflets in bookshops, in magazines and places, getting people informed in different ways. And also the more visual versions of methods such as cartoons and animations. I think a very interesting method that can be used, especially for different kinds of campaigns, is divestment. Divestment is the opposite of investment. It means getting rid of stocks or investment funds that are seen as unethical. So if your bank is giving loans to a fossil fuel company, then you can campaign and remove your money from that bank, is an example of maybe divestment. And this video here will clarify a bit more for you what this means.
Okay. So, great. I just want to ask before we go to the next part of the webinar, are there any questions? We've talked a lot about different methods, just that different grassroots examples can use. Are there any questions that you have, maybe even not necessarily for me, but for anyone else in the chat? And if anyone didn't get a chance to speak or wants to share anything else, before we move to the next section, now would be the best time to do that. So feel free to write in the chat if you have any questions or add additional comments you want to add. We love and encourage participation. No. Okay, so I guess then if no one else feels okay, we will go on to the next section. So now in this section, we're going to be talking about, oops. Okay, hopefully this is okay. We're going to actually switch gears and talk a little bit about youth and their role in environmental grassroots movements. So, oops, someone has a comment. There we go. I knew they were coming in. Full screen is on bottom left corner. Sorry, I know I'm struggling with this right now. Oops. I don't know why it's not working. Let's see, 1 second. No. Okay, so if this is okay for you, I hope this is okay for everybody. So what we're going to do now is actually, I know that we asked you all to bring some papers and some colorful pens, and now we've been watching Olalla get visual and have some nice images, but now it's actually our turn. So I want each of you to grab that blank paper that you have near you and grab those pens and just take about 5 minutes. I want you to think for a moment about what is the role of youth in environmental grassroots movements. So there's no right or wrong answer, anything that comes to mind. We have some questions to help you and prompt, so feel free to visually represent any of these or all of these. Feel free to pick and choose. Some questions you might want to ask yourself are, what is the current situation you see of youth involvement in environmental grassroots movements? You can also ask yourself, are there leadership roles for youth? If so, where and what kinds? What positive examples do you see in your local reality? And what is missing or could be improved? Please take 5 minutes to just take those 5 minutes to just really get engaged and active, involved in this, and then we'll come back and we'll actually go into breakout groups to share. Feel free, get creative. You can draw, you can write some words if you need, but don't worry about anything. Just feel free and draw so that you have something nice to share in your discussion soon. Take just a couple more minutes. And just your last minute. Any final keywords or picture drawings or something you don't want to lose? Make sure you put it down now. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to have you break into breakout rooms. For those of you that are new to Zoom, you're going to have a message that will go on, and we'll be in small groups of 2 to 3 people. And I just want you to just take just a couple minutes. You can hold up your drawing. So those of you who are not using video, feel free to please turn on your video so you can show your picture and your drawing to those in your breakout rooms, and just share some of the things that came to mind when you do this. We'll have about 6 or 7 minutes in total, so please make sure that everybody has just some time to speak and share equally. So I'm going to actually create the breakout rooms now. And let's see, we have, great, just a couple with 3 and some with 2, and we also have our facilitators in there as well. So feel free, if you are facilitators, if you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. But if not, you can just share if you didn't get a chance to draw what you came to mind. Okay, so here we go. Should have an invitation.
well, it was a bit hard because Rafaela couldn't speak and we're just together, so we don't have a lot to say. But it was really good. It was really good, like, but just to say.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Nathan, for sharing that. I'm sorry it was a bit random, but I hope that you found a way to communicate maybe through writing or texting. Great, thank you so much. So maybe for those of us who haven't seen, you want to just, if you want to keep your video on, you want to just hold up some of these drawings so we can see all the others. We haven't seen anyone else's. If you'd like to, it'd be really nice to see what you came up with. Let's see, can we see any of them? You can feel free. In my 130 seconds, this is all I drew. Anyone else want to share what they drew? Feel free to turn on your video because we can't see you. Oh, nice. Very creative. Thank you, Ergi. Nice. Anyone else? Ooh, Nathan, can you hold it back up? And Maya? Okay, now we can see. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Lots of creative ideas. Thank you all so much. So I'm now going to, hopefully you had some nice fruitful discussion about, youth and what their role is currently or what their role could be within environmental grassroots movements. I'm now excited to share with you actually, we have a wonderful guest speaker who's actually the Secretary General of YEE, Bilinç Sezgin, and he's actually going to share with us a bit about his experience of working in environmental organizations. Oops, maybe make sure everyone's muted again. Oops. So he's going to share about his experience and how and what organizations can do based on his experience to really put youth at the center of environmental grassroots movements. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass this off to you now, Bilinç, but Olalla will again be graphically recording. Thank you, Olalla. So Olalla, feel free to share your screen.
Hello all. Well, just give me a minute. So I'm Bilinç. I have just started to work as the Secretary General of YEE. I am very new to this community, but I'm very excited also. I'm sorry, my camera does not work, so and you won't see me, but I will hope that I'll see you in the following days. Before here, I was working in Greenpeace Turkey as a volunteer coordinator. So I had some experiences with some grassroots movements because of my job and because of my out-of-time work. What I'm going to share is just experience and my deductions out of it. So feel free to join, feel free to disagree. Let's talk it together. If you want to give examples, if you are inspired by the cases that I am presenting, please give real-life examples. So we have already defined what is a grassroots movement, but for the sake of the discussion, I'm going to limit it to environmental struggles. So a grassroots movement can be against a power plant, a coal power plant, a mining activity, deforestation, hydroelectricity power plants. But in general, it will include people who are willing to protect the nature against destruction. It may start with just one person, as we already discussed in the case of Greta Thunberg, and it may go up to a global level. It may also start as an unorganized occasional protest to a nationwide movement, or it may be started by a small community. It can achieve its goal and disseminate, or sometimes
without achieving the goal, and just out of frustration, they can again disseminate. Grassroots movements usually carry the potential to gain sympathy because they usually root from people, from local people. We see them as they are. They are not like planned images before. How they sound, how they look, all the actions they conduct, they come from their own culture. It's not surprising that their effectiveness comes from being original, because they are the ones who will suffer the consequences of the relevant environmental destruction from the first hand. Just a minute. Well, big NGOs, small NGOs, they can sometimes support openly to grassroots movements. They can use their brand. I can give an example like Greenpeace Turkey, again, from my experience. They have supported many grassroots movements fighting against coal power plants. They campaign together with them. They can be sometimes the ones who started the movement but spread it into grassroots level. I can give an example of from 350.org, who started the Break Free from Fossil Fuels movement in 2016. So what they did was they come up with the idea to make a global action day, and in all around the world, they try to reach to whatever communities that they can reach. And in one day, millions of people stand together against fossil fuels. They did actions in their own countries, in relevant places. Sometimes they can be invisible too. They can join movements with their support. They can mobilize their volunteers, supporters for marches. They can spread the word with their channels, which are followed by millions. And still, they don't take any credit or ownership. Again, the best example for this can be the climate strikes. I know that many organizations supporting it, but none of them claiming the ownership of it. That's a good example for that. The collaboration of grassroots movements with environmental organizations can happen in many ways, diverse levels. So I'll try to divide this into 4 phases, like approaching, planning, implementing, and follow-up. Let's start with approach. Environmental organizations may play their roles in many phases. It usually depends on what the grassroots organization wants, what is their vision, as well as the vision of the environmental organization or an NGO. I will use the word NGO if it is okay with everyone. It is much shorter for that. Sometimes they approach to big NGOs. If they may feel like they need help, they don't know what to do. If they are aware that multiplying their voice will help them to achieve their goals. Sometimes they may approach to big NGOs in a phase where they want to develop as a more structured organization, when they need some trainings about how to mobilize more people, how to use social media more effectively, or how to create actions, events to support their cause. On the other hand, there are many cases in which NGOs approach to the grassroots movements. They may have many intentions. They can be very innocent and just want to support the movement because their fight corresponds to their own mission, or they might be just opportunists and see a potential win in the future and want to take credit from it. They might aim to raise funds through this movement, might recruit volunteers or increase their sign-up numbers. Actually, it is very easy to detect such organizations if you see them offering their support only conditionally. Sometimes they ask to use their own logo, they claim ownership. However, there are many cases that NGOs might be willing to support with an opposite condition, such as promise of never mentioning their names, levels of contribution to the movement, it can be a responsible decision based on like, we don't want to harm the movement with the perceptions stick to us as an organization, as an NGO, or the NGO might see a potential of harming their brand reputation with examples which could violate their values, principles, historical background, mission, and vision. Another thing that would end the relationship between an environmental organization and the grassroots movement could be just quite, how can I say, materialistic things too. Like, there is common belief that NGOs exist to support everyone, to every grassroots movements. However, in real life, many NGOs have limited financial and human capacities. They have plans, yearly plans already settled. Sometimes, even if they want to support the grassroots, they just might not have a budget or a person to spare for it. Eventually, no matter what, who approaches whom, all parties should agree on common norms. They should agree on how will they work, how will they share the burden, how will they celebrate it in the future. This is necessary to avoid all future misunderstandings, possible conflicts, frustrations. If this is the case, it is likely that a fruitful collaboration can come up for both. Okay, let's assume all norms are set. Now we have to plan what we are going to do together. Now someone should make the planning. What to do with this collaboration normally depends on where the grassroots movements want to go with it. In this phase, there is a common conflict on when and how to do things. For example, designing a campaign, like how will we approach, what kind of messages we will use, how will we recruit more people, making an event or an action. If there is good and open communication between the parties, it can result desirable consequences. If not, there is always the possibility of conflicts. Let's give an example. The professionals or the experienced volunteers of the environmental organizations sometimes do the mistake of overconfidence. They can claim they know the best, they can be, or even if they are not, they can sound or seem like arrogant. They might want to arrange things according to their calendar. However, in the best practices, the NGOs should be very well aware of the realities of the grassroots, where this grassroots was born, in which circumstances they were born, how did they started to amplify their voice. They should be prepared on what kind of communication they will use. They need to be well understood. Everyone should be should communicate clearly. They should be, on the other hand, the grassroots organizations should be listening to their advices. The environmental organizations should be listening to their advices, I mean grassroots organizations' advices on what kind of activities can reflect the movement better. While they are benefiting, the grassroots movements are benefiting from the organization's expertise, such as tactics, tools on how to amplify their sound. If necessary, they should organize trainings to build capacities of the grassroots movements. Trainings or workshops can have a diverse spectrum, from practicalities like how to make a banner, how to do events, actions, photography, speaking to press, how to use of social media, to more theoretical debates like how to design a strategy for long-term goals, how to deal with legal consequences, what are their rights, or even a movie screening and creating a discussion around it. So now we came to the implementation phase. During implementing whatever we planned before, again, there are some common mistakes. Again, actually coming from some same roots, similar roots, NGOs sometimes can be bossy. They want to do things as they know, as they want. Of course, and naturally, the NGOs provide much more experienced people to implement things. However, it is always important to give to the grassroots the feeling of doing it together. the best way to do it come from empowerment and learning together. It's a very popular word nowadays, this empowerment. We hear it here in this session too. But it is rarely used as it should be, because empowerment does not come only from a training, from building capacity. The trainings, of course, ensure a solid base. However, real learning comes from practicing it. So the NGOs should not stop at delivering the training. They also should be guiding the grassroots movements on how to use those skills they just have got.
Thank you so much, Bilinç. We have like 1 more minute. Can you wrap up? Because we have to make sure we go on to our next speaker after. So please, these are really interesting and we can always come back to it after, but we want to make sure we give Gökşen time before she has to go.
Okay.
Just so you can wrap up your last thoughts.
Well, my last thoughts, okay. Well, the big NGOs, small NGOs, grassroots movements, everyone has its own way of seeing the world. Everyone knows a piece of the big picture. However, we all agree on something, creating a better world. This will come through change, and the best change agents are people who can compromise, who can find ways to work together, because it comes from affecting enough number of people. It comes from spreading the word. A sustainable way of change making comes from alliances, coalitions. Within these collaborations, there always should be respect to knowledge, courage to act, commitment to the cause. Well, I tried to give examples from an ideal world, but we always need to keep in mind that we are not living in one. So patience and keep up the good work to everyone. Thank you for listening. Sorry for being a little bit longer.
No problem. Thank you so much, Bilinç. We appreciate it. And again, we can always come back to this. I just want to make sure we have time to talk to Gökşen before she knows she has to leave. So thank you so much. It's really interesting. And please, if you have any questions for Bilinç, hold on to them, write them down, don't lose them, because we will come back to them afterwards. I now would like to introduce Bilinç Sezgin. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Bilinç actually is going to share with us some legal tools for environmental grassroots movements. Gökşen works with the Climate Action Network. And so Gökşen is going to share with us her legal tools for environmental grassroots movements. We're really very fortunate and appreciative to have you here, Gökşen. This is something that we don't often think about as youth when we organize our own grassroots movements. How and what are the legal aspects we need to take into consideration? So we appreciate you. Please feel free to share your screen as you're doing, and feel free to start whenever
Thank you
you're ready.
very much. And I'm sorry that I need to leave a little bit early because I am not as young as you are and I have a small kid that needs to be in bed before 10 p.m. So I will start very quickly to explain climate litigation. What does it mean? It's a very new and I would say a popular term that is being used by different movements, and it is a kind of, it started as a small trend that's a kind of action initiated by some NGOs, but the moment we saw that it has an impact on the real politics, it's spread all around the world. And we will talk about how many climate cases that are happening at this moment in world jurisdictions in a couple of minutes. But let me explain what is the theory of change of climate litigation, climate change litigation. So we know that in a state has 3 powers, and there's a separation of powers. We have legislative power that is in charge of making laws and supervising their implementation. And we have executive power, who is in charge of implementing laws. And when there's a problem that we see the state is not doing its legislative and executive power, we have a right to go to the court and activate jurisdiction. So the power that ensures that the laws are complied with. So the idea of climate change litigation is based on this theory of change. We see that governments are failing. They are unable to address the climate crisis as it needs to be addressed. So we see that people all around the world are affected by climate change, and we know that the science is telling us that the future impacts will be much more worse than what people are living at this moment across the world. And climate change is a transboundary issue. The governments are always saying that, no, but the other one is more responsible than us. Historically, we have less responsibility and whatever, but they're playing with words. They are writing. There was one participant who gave the example of the Irish government. It's like they are playing with words. They are very good on paper, but they are doing more or less nothing to address the emergency as a kind of emergency. So we know that in 2015, more than 190 governments signed Paris Agreement and committed to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degree. Just to give you an idea, we are around 1.1 in Europe today. So we have very, very limited time to take action. Last year, the biggest scientific body of UN, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they published a new report and they say that we can still limit the temperature rise to 1.5, but we need unprecedented changes in all the sectors and all the forms and all our ways of living. So we see that actually what they committed to do under international agreements and the targets or the national policies are not in line. They say big words in the international negotiations, but when they go back to home, they are not doing much. So as we briefly said, climate science is also showing that there are solutions and the governments should realize those solutions, but they are refraining to do it. So based on this category of change that the governments are not doing enough, and we need to urge them, and we need to use the jurisdiction to do this in order to ask the governments and remind the government its duty of care and ask them to do what they need to do, created this climate change litigation trend. Today, more than 1,000 climate cases we have across the world. Maybe you have heard Juliana case, which is in most of the biggest newspapers. It's initiated by 21 young people in US, and they are challenging the US governments by knowing climate change for years and not doing nothing. So there is a rise in the strategic climate cases, and most of them are using the arguments of human rights. They say that the governments have a responsibility to protect the human rights, the basic rights of their citizens, but they are failing to protect their rights, right to health, right to occupation, right to property, right to live. All sorts of rights are impacted by climate change, and governments are failing. So there is also, besides this, there are a number of cases that are asking for some greenhouse gas emission reduction measures, or asking for compensation money or additional measures to adapt to climate change. If we speak about the trends, we can say that there are two big categories or trends in climate litigation. One of them is the climate litigation against governments. So the people are taking their governments to court and asking them to protect their human rights or develop better measures to protect them or adapt to climate change. Or secondly, they are directly taking the fossil fuel companies to court by saying that in a world where we need to limit the temperature rise to 1.5, they are making mistake in terms of their planning and company policies. So this is more or less just to give you an idea about how the climate cases are spread around the world. It's not only, you see that there's a lot of cases in Europe, a lot of cases in US and Australia, but this is not only limited to this. You see that in Colombia, for example, it's a very good example that the case is initiated by a youth NGO. They challenged, in 3 months they won the case. Now the government is revising their climate policy. In India, it is the same thing. They, again, I think a farmer launched a case and he won the case. It was a human rights case. Now the Indian government is more vocal on climate action. The same thing for Pakistan. So we see that it's not only a trend happening in the, I would say, developed countries, but it is also happening in many different countries. And I know that there are tens of other countries where NGOs or individuals, which means grassroots, who are impacted by climate change are preparing their own litigation actions. Just to give you an idea about very concrete outcomes of different cases, the first one, I call it the mother of climate litigation. The biggest case that happened in Europe is the Eurgain case. So a foundation, a Dutch foundation, together with 900 Dutch citizens, they took the Dutch government to court in 2013. And they say that the government's 2020 policy is not ambitious enough to protect them from the worsening impacts of climate change, given the fact that the Netherlands is already below sea levels. So the court, the first district court ordered the government to increase their climate target in 2015. The government said that no, but it's a government policy. The court cannot order this to us. And they appealed to the higher court. Last year, they again won the case in the higher court. And then the government said that, okay, we are left only 2 years to make another 5% of decrease in our greenhouse gas emissions, but we will do that. We just want to appeal just to make sure that if the court can order us to do it. Now, last week, there was the hearing in the highest court in Netherlands, and it is really inspiring to see that all these judges in their, in their clothes and in very serious faces, they are discussing climate science in courtrooms by saying that, but it's whose responsibility? Because our legal systems are not designed for this. So you're challenging also the legal system of the countries by putting the fact of climate change in front of them. So another case that is very, I would say, another landmark case, it is Juarez case. It's known as Juarez case. So it's a farmer from Peru who is living in a village named Juarez, and the village is actually on the bottom of a glacier lake. And as the melting of glaciers is threatening all the village, he is asking RWE, which is the Germany's biggest coal company, and somebody mentioned Elde Gelände, so it's them. It's RWE who is doing coal mining in Elde Gelände, and there are thousands of people who are already doing different sorts of actions against RWE, and one of them is Saul. And he has taken RWE to court, and the court accepted the case. They said, okay, this is true. RWE is historically responsible of all these greenhouse gas emissions, and they need to pay for the adaptation measures of this village. Now there is an expert review that is happening to identify how much of this adaptation cost should be paid by the company. This might not mean a lot because Saul is asking only for 20,000 euro of compensation. But if this case is won, it would mean that everybody in the world who is impacted by climate change would be able to take RWE to court. And then it will set a precedent, and probably the stock shares and the profits of RWE will collapse, and we will see the end of coal, hopefully in Germany. So this is a kind of good tool to challenge the companies also. So now I am working on the People's Climate case. This is the first climate case happening at the European courts. So you see a number of photos on this slide. I will briefly explain you. From top on the left, you see Morris. He's a farmer in France. He's impacted by droughts. In the middle, you see the Sami Youth Association from Sweden. I don't know if you are familiar with indigenous people in Europe, but Sami people are living in the north of Europe in a territory named Sapmi and cross-passing Norway, Finland, Sweden, and in some parts of Russia. And they are mostly reindeer herders and living in Arctic Circle. The temperature increase they face is already around 3 degrees today in the Arctic Circle. And it is, they are impacted in many ways, but I think the most horrible one is that it's an indigenous community and they are reindeer herders. They don't learn how to herd reindeers in university. This information comes from their ancestors and passing from one generation to another generation. And they reached a point actually that their ancestors cannot answer the questions that the young generation is asking. So one of them was telling us that it's like there is one lake that every June they help reindeers to pass this lake, but this year actually the lake wasn't there, so the reindeers couldn't drink enough water, and they went to their summer grazing lands like this, and they asked their ancestors how they are going to find water during the summer period, and there was no answers. Last year, there was the first wildfires in Sweden, in the Arctic Circle. It happened for the first time. There is no answer. And this is creating enormous mental stress on the Sami youth. And according to the data that is given to us, the suicide rate among Sami youth is around 30%. So it is extremely high. So still on the first line on the top, at the right, you see Armando, who lost all his forested land in the wildfires, in the Portuguese wildfires in 2017. Now on the second line, on the left, you see Petru, he's a Romanian farmer. In the center, you see Giorgio, who is an Italian farmer and a hotel owner in Alps. And as there are no snow, nobody is going to his region anymore, and his small Airbnb hotel is about to not to make enough living for the whole family. And on the right at the bottom, you see a German family who is living in an island in the North Sea, and they are facing to lose all the freshwater resources of the island if the sea level continues like this in the next 5 to 10 years. So every year they are taking adaptation measures, like increasing the level of sand dunes, but they are about to reach the point that actually those sand dunes will not protect fresh water, and if there is no fresh water in that island, there will not be a way to live on that island. So all these families are impacted by climate change in Europe, but we don't know them, we don't see them. It's a real impact happening to them. So they came together and they decided to take the EU to court, because this is not something that they can solve in one country. So this is EU's problem and the European Union should solve it together. So the 10 families and the Sami Youth Association from Sweden, they took the EU to court. They claimed that the EU's 2030 climate targets, so the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, is too low to protect their fundamental rights and prevent climate crisis. So what happened since they launched the case? It helped a lot to build pressure on the EU, and it contributed a lot to the EU's climate target debate. Now you see 3 small photos on this slide. So the one on the very left is 9 Danish MEPs. So we don't have any Danish family or Danish plaintiff in the case, but 9 Danish MEPs who are watching the movie of the People's Climate case, and they are trying to answer in their political campaign how they are going to ensure a better future for those families and people. The photo you see in the middle is taken in the European Parliament, and they are together. You see our Romanian and the Sami plaintiff on this photo. They are together with a number of MEPs, so members of European Parliament, actually the people that they have taken to court. And they are together with them, and members of the European Parliament are telling them that this information is very crucial for them. They are going to push their own groups and political groups to be more vocal on the 2030 targets. This is an example that happened at the policy level, but besides this, they gave, I think, thousands of interviews in different newspapers across Europe, and they won, the German family won a kind of action prize from Germany's biggest newspaper to take this courageous action to protect their livelihoods. Of course, having thousands of interviews is not an objective itself, but it helped a lot to change the narrative in Europe that climate change is somebody else's problem. No, it is Europe's problem, and it is Europeans' problem. Today, we have hundreds of thousands of European farmers who are feeling the impacts of climate change, and this needs to be urgently addressed. So at the policy level, if I come back to the policy level, the European Parliament, so one of the defendants, or one of the institutions that those people have taken to court, has adopted 2 decisions which are calling for an increase of the EU's climate targets. And secondly, a majority of European member states, around 22 member states, who have already expressed that the targets are not enough to protect citizens. So of course, it didn't happen because there was this case, but the case added another momentum to existing momentum, and it helped to build on all the other citizen mobilizations and the grassroots mobilizations. So what happened and what is happening next? So last week, the court dismissed the case, but accepted that the climate change is affecting everyone. Basically, the court say that it is affecting everyone in Europe, and we don't see a reason for only those families to take the EU to court, which actually gives us an argument that it is. If those families cannot take the EU to court, then we should maybe go to court altogether. So this is what Morris is saying in the climate strike, and he is invited to speak and share how he is impacted by climate change. Now they will appeal, but the case added a momentum. It's one of the tools, as we are discussing since the beginning of this webinar, but it is a kind of time and energy consuming tool. But if it works, like it happened in the Eurgain case, it has a direct political outcome. If it doesn't work, as we see in the People's Climate case, it adds an enormous momentum on the other mobilizations, on the other dynamics, and it helps creating a change. So I think I will stop here. If there are questions on this climate litigation topic, maybe I can answer them for 5 minutes, and then I will need to leave.
Thank you so much, Gökşen. Any questions? Feel free to let us know if you have any questions at all about this, legal tools, anything that comes to mind. Okay, if there's no questions at all, you can also feel free. We will send out later maybe some contact information. So if any questions come up, maybe Gökşen, you can answer some of our questions. I'm sure it's amazing information, a lot of information. Maybe we all need a bit more time to digest, but I'm sure as we start thinking more about starting our own environmental grassroots movements and the legality and legal tools within that, you may be hearing from quite a few of us.
Yeah, sure. Please do not hesitate to share my email address. I'm writing it in the chat box actually. Wonderful. So that everyone can.
We have some nice comments in the chat. I don't know if you can see. Agne wrote, "It was so interesting," with lots of O's, so it was very interesting. Tia wrote, "Thank you. I feel inspired to put EU in court." So even if we don't have any questions, please know we're really, really grateful for your time, and thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you very much. I added my email address in the chat box, so if there are any questions, you can still write to me.
Great.
I will be happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gökşen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time. Yeah. We'll be in touch very soon.
Bye.
Okay, so let me just find, I can put back my video. So right now, I just also want to see if we have any questions for Bilinç. If we didn't get a chance to ask him any questions, and if there's any kind of additional questions or clarifications you'd like, please feel free. Now is the time and space to do that. You can put your hands up in the chat or write your name, and we'll call on you. Okay, maybe it was so clear, Bilinç, we don't have any questions. Oh, Bilinç, there was a question. So Olalla, maybe we can go back to sharing your screen from Bilinç's talk. There was a question, Bilinç, because we had to cut you off, unfortunately. We were wondering what was the fourth step after the implementation you were getting ready to tell us?
After the implementation, actually the most, how can I say, underrated part of any work is follow-up. People usually fail to follow up what did they have done. If we consider the relationship between the NGOs, environmental youth organizations, and the grassroots movements, I see a lack of like lessons learned. Sometimes they can do that. They can come bring together those lessons learned very well, but in most of the case, same mistakes and same frustrations come along too. So in very short, I can say the follow-up mechanisms are ready to be criticized, feedback mechanisms. That's what I was going to talk about.
Great, thank you. Very important, we know in the work of NGOs. Yes, if we're going to implement or do anything, we must for sure follow up on all of that. And through follow-up is often how we can get more of our youth continue to get involved and get engaged, find new opportunities to get involved in our organization. So that's really, really important. Thank you so much. Before I pass it over to Cansu to wrap up, are there any final questions? It can be to Bilinç, it could be to YEE, anyone in this webinar who you wanted to learn more about what they were saying. Feel free to ask any questions. Okay. Well, as we said, if any questions come up, you can always feel free to send us emails or send it to anyone here. We'll pass around some contact information. So now I will go to Cansu.
Thank you. Thank you, Romy, also so far keeping up with all the facilitation and as well as Ergen. So first of all, thank you both. Yes, thank you for being with us. I'd like to also thank Bilinç and Gökşen already left, but their contributions are very valuable. And as we said in the beginning of this webinar, we recorded this webinar and we will be uploading it on our website, as well as all the visuals from Olalla will be there. So feel free to also check them out later. And finally, I would like to remind we will have another webinar, which is our final webinar on June 12th, which is next week, same time, and on Zoom again. So hopefully people who didn't get the chance to speak now can also figure out the technical issues and participate more actively. So next week we will have Harriet Riley from UNICEF. She is going to present us how we can use social media for social change. So she will go through. She will mostly work. Tell us and share us tools about social media through campaigning and how we can use this in grassroots movements. So you're also kindly expected there, and I will be sharing another meeting link, which is not this one, but another meeting link that you can join us there. And finally, I would like to thank you all for your participation here in the webinar. And if you have any questions to me, I would be answering them on email if you have questions about webinar, or if you have any recommendations, or if you have anything that you're curious about to see. Also, one more thanks to Olalla for your patience and for your tremendous work on visual recording of this webinar. So good. I will close the meeting here. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you all so much, and we appreciate your time for being with us today. Thank you for everyone who contributed. Bye-bye.